with measurement because, well, if you measure the wrong thing, you end up fixing the wrong problem. So, our first topic is this. The incidence and intensity of poverty are more important in determining poverty based on income alone. In this context, analyze the latest United Nations Multidimensional Poverty Index report.
Okay. So traditionally, poverty measurement, it's often been about a simple line. The World Bank might say less than $1 a day, or committees in India set specific monthly income levels.
That gives us a number, a sort of quantity of poverty. How many people fall below that line?
Yes, but our sources really emphasize that this misses the bigger picture. Two other dimensions are arguably more important. First, there's the incidence of poverty.
Okay, that sounds straightforward. That's just the percentage of people below the poverty line, yeah.
Exactly. It tells you the width or the scale of the problem, helps governments figure out how big their welfare schemes need to be, basically.
But then there's the intensity of poverty. And this seems like the really critical part for policy.
It is. Intensity measures the depth of deprivation. So let's say the line is 1407 a month. Someone earning 800 is obviously in a much tougher spot than someone earning 1200.
Right. Even though both are technically poor by that single measure.
Precisely. Intensity tells you not just how many people are poor, but how poor they are. Who needs the most urgent, targeted help?
And that leads us directly to the UN Multidimensional Poverty Index, the MPI.
Yes. If income is about the quantity of money someone lacks, the MPI is about the quality of life they're missing out on. It looks at overlapping deprivation.
Overlapping, how does that work?
Well, it measures across 10 specific indicators grouped into 3 main dimensions. You've got health, that's nutrition, and child mortality. Then education years of schooling, school attendance.
Right.
And finally, standard of living. This covers things like cooking fuel, sanitation, clean water, electricity, housing, and even basic assets.
So it's a much broader view of deprivation.
Much broader. And the clever part is how it's calculated. It essentially multiplies the incidence, the scale, by the average intensity, the depth.
So you get one number, but it captures both how widespread and how severe the poverty is.
That's the idea.
So what did the latest report, the 2021, show for India?
Well, the findings were pretty striking, actually. On a global scale, about 1.3 billion people are multidimensionally poor. India ranks 62nd out of 107 countries with an MPI score of 0.123.
And vulnerability, people just above the line.
That's also key. About 19.3% of India's population is considered vulnerable to falling back into multidimensional poverty.
But there was good news too, right? Significant progress.
Huge progress. India lifted an incredible 270 million people out of multidimensional poverty in the decade leading up to the report. That's really world-leading stuff.
Wow. So the MPI helps track that progress, but also flags where the risks remain.
Exactly. It helps target resources to prevent those 19.3% from slipping back. And it directly aligns with Sustainable Development Goal 1, ending poverty in all its forms. Plus, you can adapt it for local contexts.
Okay. So we have a better way to measure the depth of the problem.
Yeah.
Now let's shift to a specific solution often aimed at that depth, especially in rural areas.
Right.
Our next topic, microfinance as an anti-poverty vaccine, is aimed at asset creation and income security of the rural poor in India. Evaluate the role of self-help groups in achieving the twin objectives, along with empowering women in rural India.
Microfinance, yeah, it's often framed like that, an anti-poverty vaccine. The core idea is financial inclusion for those often left out.
Like who, specifically?
Well, our sources point out that about 30% of microfinance loans go to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, for example. It's about giving easier access to credit.
Getting people away from, say, local moneylenders who charge exorbitant rates.
Exactly, breaking that cycle of debt. And it's supported by big initiatives, inspired by the Grameen Bank model, things like the MUDRA scheme in India, or NABARD linking banks with self-help groups.
And those self-help groups, the SHGs,
Yeah.
they seem to be the key delivery mechanism here.
They really are. These small groups, usually women, come together, save small amounts, and then can access formal credit as a collective.
Before we get into the benefits, though, isn't there sometimes a risk? Doesn't microfinance occasionally lead to over-indebtedness if it's not managed well?
That's a very real concern, and good governance within the SHG is absolutely crucial. But when they work well, it's fascinating how these small groups drive quite significant change. They tackle sort of 3 big things at once.
Okay, what are those?
First, asset creation. The collective savings and loans allow them to invest, maybe in small cottage industries or agricultural inputs. They build skills, capacity.
So pooling resources to start something bigger than one person could alone. like the Kunumashree example in Kerala.
Precisely. And linked to that is the second objective, income security. It's not just about creating an asset, but generating steady income from it.
How do SHGs help with that?
Well, they often provide better market access. Think about famous examples like Amul or Lajat Papad, built on collective models. It helps diversify income, moving beyond just traditional, often uncertain agriculture. It creates a cushion.
Asset creation, income security. And you said three things.
Yes. The third, and arguably the most transformative, is the empowerment of women. Since women are often the core of SHGs, they gain huge leadership skills, financial literacy, confidence.
So it's economic empowerment, but also social.
Absolutely. These groups often become platforms for social change, tackling issues like dowry, child marriage. They increase women's participation in local governance, give them collective bargaining power. It hits SDG 1 on poverty and SDG 5 on gender equality simultaneously.
That's a powerful combination. Okay, so we've looked at measuring poverty deeply and a grassroots financial tool.
Right.
Now let's shift gears to the legal side of the system. The next question. How far do you agree with the view that tribunals curtail the jurisdiction of ordinary courts? In view of the above, discuss the constitutional validity and competency of the tribunals in India.
Okay, tribunals. These are basically specialized, sort of quasi-judicial bodies. They're set up by parliament or state legislatures based on Articles 323A and 323B, which were added by the 42nd Amendment.
And the idea was speed and specialization, right?
Right.
To handle specific types of cases like tax disputes or environmental issues faster than the regular courts.
That was the intention, speed and expertise. Now, the argument that they curtail court jurisdiction, well, it has some weight.
How so?
By definition, when you create a special body to hear specific types of cases, you are taking those cases away from the regular court's jurisdiction. So there's an element of encroachment.
Like the National Green Tribunal making a ruling on pollution that might previously have gone through several levels of ordinary court.
Exactly. And sometimes appeals from tribunals might even bypass the High Court, going straight to the Supreme Court. This raised concerns.
Concerns about what? Undermining the judicial hierarchy.
Partly that, but also about the separation of powers. The Supreme Court, in a key case, Chandra Kumar, actually emphasized that high courts should generally have supervisory jurisdiction over tribunals.
Why was that so important?
Because there were worries about the independence of tribunals. If the executive branch has too much say in appointing members or setting their terms, their ability to act impartially, separate from government influence, could be compromised. That touches on Article 50 of the Constitution.
Okay, so constitutionally, they are valid because they were set up by a constitutional amendment.
Yes, their constitutional validity isn't really the issue, provided they maintain that crucial judicial independence. The bigger questions revolve around their competency and effectiveness in practice.
So how competent are they? Do they work?
Well, they certainly have successes. They do take a significant load off the regular judiciary, and we know the courts are facing a massive backlog, something like 4.3 crore pending cases.
That's huge.
It is. And tribunals bring in specialized knowledge. They often focus more on principles of natural justice, less on rigid procedures, which can be good.
But there are downsides to their competency.
The challenges often come back to that independence point. If appointments are seen as politically influenced, or if members don't have security of tenure, their ability to make tough, impartial decisions can be questioned. That impacts perceived competency.
So it's a balancing act. They're needed for efficiency and expertise, but we have to constantly safeguard their independence to ensure they function properly alongside, not just instead of, the courts.
That sums it up pretty well. They complement the system, but the overlap requires careful management.
All right, let's bring it back to the fundamental issues we started with. The next big question is about progress over time.
Okay.
Hunger and poverty are the biggest challenges for good governance in India still today. Evaluate how far successive governments have progressed in dealing with these humongous problems. Suggest measures for improvement.
And these two, hunger and poverty, they are so deeply intertwined, aren't they? A real vicious cycle. The scale of the challenge remains immense.
The stats are still quite stark. India ranking 107th out of 121 in the 2022 Global Hunger Index. That's concerning.
It is, and particularly worrying is the child wasting rate, the highest in the world at 19.3%. That reflects acute undernutrition.
So huge challenges remain. But what about progress? Have governments made inroads?
Oh, absolutely. Successive governments have rolled out massive initiatives. For hunger, you have the National Food Security Act providing subsidized grains, the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana during the pandemic, the midday meal scheme in schools, the ICDS for young children and
And
mothers.
for poverty.
Major programs like MGNGA guaranteeing rural employment, the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, DANRLM, the PM Jana for microenterprise loans we touched on earlier. The scale of effort has been significant.
And have these efforts actually moved the needle? We talked about the MPI progress.
Yes, and other measures confirm it. The UN data showing 270 million lifted out of national poverty between 2005 and 2021 is a testament to that. World Bank figures also show a dramatic fall in extreme poverty, from around 35% in 1990 down to about 11% by 2013. So progress is undeniable.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
There is. If we connect this back to our MPI discussion and the hunger stats, while income poverty has fallen, the deep-seated issues around nutrition persist. NFHS4 data showed 35.7% of children stunted. That's chronic undernutrition affecting long-term development, and 21% wasted.
So we're maybe lifting incomes, but not necessarily improving health outcomes at the same pace.
That seems to be the crux of it. We're tackling the quantity of poverty faster than the quality of deprivation, especially regarding nutrition. That has long-term consequences for individuals and the country.
That's a critical distinction. So looking forward, what are the suggested measures for improvement?
Well, it's about strengthening what works the safety nets, but also promoting growth that's truly inclusive, reaching the most marginalized. Crucially, targeted interventions are needed, especially for pregnant women and young children during that critical first 1,000 days window.
And broader factor.
Improving rural infrastructure, roads, storage, markets is key, and enhancing agricultural productivity, making it more resilient to climate change, is fundamental. It's about hitting both SDG 1, no poverty, and SDG 2, zero hunger, together.
Okay, that makes sense. Which leads us perfectly into our final and perhaps most challenging topic. We have the measurement tools, we have local interventions like SHGs, we have massive government schemes. Yet there's this persistent feeling reflected in the sources that sometimes these programs are just showpieces. So the final question, poverty alleviation programs in India remain mere showpieces until and unless they are backed by political will. Discuss with reference to the performance of the major poverty alleviation programs in India.
It's a provocative statement, but it captures a real tension. We know India has made incredible strides, pulling 415 million people out of multidimensional poverty in 15 years, as we mentioned. That wouldn't happen if the program designs were fundamentally useless.
Right. So the blueprints might be okay, but the execution.
That's where the issues lie. Look at the track record. The old IRDP from the 80s, it suffered from poor planning, inefficient delivery. Even massive successes like MGN-REGA, which demonstrably reduced rural poverty, face constant struggles with low wages, delayed payments, and ensuring work is available consistently.
And the Mudra scheme for entrepreneurs.
It faces hurdles too. Low awareness among potential beneficiaries is one problem. Another is banks being hesitant to lend to what they call thin file clients, people without a formal credit history, the very people it's meant to help.
So these performance issues, the argument is they stem from a deeper lack of consistent political will.
That's what the sources suggest. The underlying problems are often about governance. Corruption is a major one, middlemen siphoning off funds or demanding bribes.
Systemic leakages too.
Absolutely. Huge problems with inclusion and exclusion errors. That means benefits going to people who aren't eligible, while genuinely needy people are left out. One estimate back in 2011 suggested leakages could be as high as 34%. That's a massive waste and inefficiency.
What else undermines the programs?
Lack of proper accountability mechanisms. Social audits aren't always effective. Community participation can be weak. Sometimes there's just staff insensitivity or indifference at the delivery level. And having too many overlapping schemes can create confusion and inefficiency.
So if political will is the missing ingredient, what does that actually look like in practice? What's the way forward?
It means a sustained, genuine commitment from the top. It means actively collaborating with civil society organizations for better monitoring and delivery. It means robust, mandatory social audits and grievance redressal, training staff to be more empathetic.
And focusing the approach.
Yes, Moving away from a scattergun, one-size-fits-all approach, and really using tools like the MPI to target interventions effectively, like the Aspirational Districts program tries to do. It's about tackling the multidimensional nature of poverty head-on with genuine political backing.
Okay, that's covered a huge amount of ground. Let's try and distill this down. Can you quickly summarize the 5 main takeaways for everyone listening? Help with that active recall.
Sure, let's recap. First, poverty measurement. The UN MPI is vital. It goes beyond simple income lines to capture the depth and quality of poverty through incidence and intensity. This allows for much better targeting.
Got it. MPI for depth and quality. Second,
Second, microfinance and SHGs. Self-help groups are incredibly important, especially in rural areas. They're vehicles for asset creation, income security, and women's empowerment, tackling multiple issues at once.
right. SHGs for assets, income, and empowerment. Third point.
Third, tribunals. They are constitutionally valid and necessary for specialized, faster justice. They help ease the burden on courts. But their effectiveness hinges on protecting their independence from executive influence.
Tribunals. Needed for speed, but independence is key. Fourth.
Fourth, progress on hunger and poverty. India's made massive progress in reducing overall poverty, lifting millions. However, serious challenges remain, particularly deep malnutrition like child wasting and stunting. This requires specific health-focused interventions alongside income support.
Progress good, but nutrition lagging. Okay, and the fifth takeaway.
Fifth, program effectiveness and political will. Ultimately, the success of even well-designed poverty alleviation programs depends heavily on sustained political will. Without it, problems like corruption, leakages, and poor implementation turn potentially effective schemes into, well, showpieces.
Political will is the linchpin for making programs work. Perfect summary. We started this discussion looking at a precise measurement tool, the MPI, and we've ended up talking about the much messier, more fundamental issue of governance and political intent.
It really highlights the gap, doesn't it? We increasingly know how to identify and measure the depth of the problem, where it is, who it affects, and we also know the common implementation failures, the leakages, the lack of accountability.
So that brings us to a final thought, maybe a provocative question for you, the listener, to ponder.
Yeah, think about this. We have the data, the MPI data, which is getting more granular, showing us exactly where the deepest pockets of deprivation are. What if?
Hmm.
What if we could mandate that resources bypass the traditional, often leaky bureaucratic channels and are allocated directly based on that MPI data? Could technology and precise measurement finally overcome the need for that elusive, consistent political will to ensure aid reaches those who need it most?
Can data drive delivery directly, bypassing the bottlenecks? That's a fascinating question to leave things on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into measuring deprivation and driving social justice. We hope these insights are valuable.
Hope it sparks some thoughts.
We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.